Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 revised order extending remote participation by all members of a meeting in a public body, this meeting of the Great Barrington Affordable Housing Trust will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public or parties with a right or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website, Town of Great Barrington, townofgb.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so as per the instructions on the agenda. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Because this is a remote meeting, we need to take roll call. So Joseph Method, are you here?
Here.
Bill Cook, are you here?
Yes, here.
Ananda Timpane?
Here.
And Fred Clark is here. Those are the members attending. We have 5 persons logged in as visitors to our meeting. So I apologize for starting to talk before everything was going. I just want to say thank you for coming. The purpose of the agenda items tonight is to discuss the Affordable Housing Trust CPA application step 1. Step 1 is due November 2nd. Step 1 is a very simple document that basically identifies that we will be moving forward with an application. I'm happy to throw that. I had done a draft of that document. I'm happy to throw that up on the screen if I can find it.
Fred, before you do that, can you return to what you were saying about the budget markup?
Oh, basically, the agenda tonight includes the budget and the CPA discussion. We also included ADU, but I don't think we have time for that, and I'm going to suggest that we pass over that. The reason to talk about the budget is to look at how much money we have available, what it's in general allocated for, and how limited it is. And I believe strongly that that needs to happen in order to inform the CPA application. Is that sufficient? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, you had just started to say something and I wanted to hear what you were going to say about the budget. And that was it.
And that was it. And I thought I had this pulled up, but I don't see it here.
I do, if that's helpful. Which one do you want to look at?
The CPA phase 1, step 1.
I thought you wanted to look at the budget.
Oh, I have the budget pulled up. That's helpful. But
I also have that CPA here. I'll share.
So on this document, it simply requires us to give a brief description, as you can see on the screen, and the amount of CPA funds that we're seeking. It does not, at the step 1 phase, require specifics as to what that money could be distributed to. The $550,000 that you see in front of you was a placeholder only. It wasn't ever intended to be unilaterally put forward by me or anyone without discussing it with the group. The other part about this, just to review the CPA, in Great Barrington, the CPA generates about $600,000 of income per year. The state has a small match, but it's been diminishing every year. So the total pot available, I believe, is around $700,000, and that's rough numbers. By law, minimum 10% has to go to affordable housing, 10% to historic, and 10% to open space. By math, of course, then you could say, well, up to 80% could go for affordable housing.
There's actually another 5% that has to be set aside for administration. So it's up to 75% could go.
75. But in any case, that's and it's not just the Affordable Housing Trust, it's to other housing applicants as well. So we never know what's going to happen there. To give you historic, we received 265,000 last year. We had requested 340,000. It's not enough money, but it's, you know, it's what they were willing to do. I think that we need an idea of my feeling from going to the CPA a couple times now is that we need to justify how we would spend the money. Not necessarily with all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, but in general, with legitimate, they and town meeting after would like to know how we were going to spend the money, not just we'll figure it out. So,
well, I think we have two things already, Fred. We have the ADU proposal, which hasn't actually been released yet, and we do have the RFP, which we already have 2 applicants for.
So so Ananda shared with me something that she wrote, and I think it's excellent. And I didn't realize that 550,000 was so much of their money. So I think I had no idea. I thought that the CPA was bigger.
There have been years that it was larger.
Yeah.
I think in recent memory there was an $800,000 year, but I agree with Fred that that's not what we're looking at this year.
Yeah.
So 75, like if it was a $700,000 pot, and Jeremy said he thinks the actual amount becomes available in the fall. So Fred, we might be able to get the actual amount from Chris before we submit this.
Well, I got the number from Chris. Basically, he doesn't have the actual number, but it's something like between 700 and 800 because there's a reserve. The town meeting only last night, confirmed the distribution of the other reserve funds.
So is your understanding that 700 or 800 includes that reserve?
Yes.
And that reserve, tell me that if I'm correct, that reserve is the unspent money from what
fiscal
was
24 and before.
So it's 700 or 800,000 less the money that was approved last night.
No, the total, including the declared income for fiscal year 25, plus the carryover from the previous fiscal year, is 700,000 or 800,000.
Yeah, but where does what was approved last night come out of?
But I think that was from money that they didn't pay to Ian and some other developers to
Isn't that the reserve?
Yeah.
But isn't that the reserve?
No.
No.
Okay.
It was money.
We're not using the term reserve. What I'm using is money carried forward after the allocations for last night.
Yeah, they didn't give away all the money last year because town meeting voted.
Right, they did. And what you're saying is that the money that was allocated last night does not add up to the total amount that was not given away in FY23.
Yeah.
I have no information on that. I believe that there was some funds that were carried forward from FY 24 and 23. They always have a small reserve that I don't believe they're required to spend it all.
Oh,
No.
yeah, yeah, I was just talking with Jeremy about this today, and he was saying that they're required to set aside the 5% for admin, and then if they don't spend it, it can be moved forward.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's also that. So anyway, we're in the ballpark.
Anyway, it's
of 500.
700 or 800 is the total pot that they have available.
Which
But
puts us in the ballpark of 525,000 to 550,000.
Mhm.
If we were going to go down the road we started talking about last week, which would be to put on the table the idea of, hey, what if you just fund the trust to the
Yeah.
max with what and meet the moment of the crisis?
Yeah.
I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is I don't think that this is the year that will get approved, but I do think we're hearing from the public, the voters, that they want this to be considered. And so one way to do that is for us, to position our application and say, and apply for that maximum, that 75%, and be clear that like we're applying for the 75% because of the feedback of voters, and also it will be at your discretion, CPC, to decide what you're going to do with that and what level of funding you will do, so that we kind of are upfront about we're making this request and also we're leaving it in your hands. There's no hard feelings, and it really is your role to decide how to do it. I agree with you, Fred, about like we don't have to go into detail at this level, and I think we can strengthen our proposal by using that attach an additional page if necessary, and just laying out what we've been talking about for the past few months. So we're basically doing 5 things. Here's what they are.
so, I mean, the other thing that we have talked about briefly among some of us is taking the pulse of the town, whether those people are involved. I mean, mostly, and I've had a chance to sit down with 3 different community leaders, some of whom are representatives of the CPA, and sort of get ideas. And one person said, make it clear as possible what you're doing. If you get complicated, it's easier for them to pick off 1 or 2 ideas and say, no, we're not going to, do that. His suggestion was, keep it to a couple of ideas. He also suggested that if we can couch our programs into helping first-time home buyers, or said or not, was town residents, local people, in other words, whatever code word that is, for providing housing. And I think that there is a backlash about who's getting the benefit of the affordable housing, whether it's going to developers or whether it's going to quote out of towners, which that's a whole nother story that we've heard both for Windrush and for Bentley.
And since we brought it up, I do want to say that there is good data on that, and by far the majority of those the recent Windrush apartment, actually, I think both.
Absolutely, but anecdotally, it's out there. My neighbor
that's why I wanted to make sure we did our due diligence and said there's data. The data clearly shows that it is South County community members are the majority of people who've moved into those houses, and it's important. Everything you're saying is important, Fred.
So I'm just telling you that this person was telling me that we need to make it so that we can sell it in a picture that is wrapped up with a bow that says we're helping local people to either stay in their homes or to buy homes, and that would be that person's approach
Yeah.
for that.
I
Well,
also,
can we just look at Ananda's language?
yeah,
'Cause
can I
just
add
like
one thing before we do that? So I also spoke with a few different folks, including some CPC members, and happened to run into Jane Ralph today. And so two additional pieces I want to add is that, you know, one of the folks I talked to on CPC really wants to see what is true, that we're already like our money is very leveraged, but wants to see that and wants to see what are the other ways we're funding things. So to that end, I want to propose that we put in this proposal and that we'll take the RFP program for FY24 and continue it as a grant program for nonprofit developers, but for private developers, do it as a low interest loan program. So that becomes another way that funding comes back into the trust. And I
You
think,
mean fiscal 25?
yes, thank you for that correction.
Because I think
I'm
our
not
RFP is
fixing-
already out there for
No, you're absolutely right.
24.
No, I mean July 2024. So fiscal year 25.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can discuss that RFP. I agree with you. Your feedback was that we got it on the street probably without as much due diligence as we should have, and didn't arm ourselves with enough points to assure that we were getting what we want. So
but we're
legitimate criticisms, but you know, we can talk
Yeah.
about that.
And we're also, you know, we have a clearer process than we've had to date. So we're moving in the right direction. The other thing I wanted to also share is that Jane volunteered that she would be willing to write a letter of support to our application for us to apply for the full 75%.
I've asked Jane every year, and she's done that every year. We've done that many times. So
this was specifically about applying for the full amount.
Okay.
And she thinks that other organizations would as well. So there would be a way to make it clear that having this discussion does not have to occur in with any worry about conflict from some of the other beneficiaries of the CPC funds.
You know, if I could jump in, there's one other thing we need to emphasize is that we can, when unexpected opportunities come up during the course of the year, where somebody needs money for a down payment to buy property that they're going to turn into affordable housing, whatever, we can do that without having to wait for a town meeting cycle. Whereas the CPC doesn't have that ability generally. I mean, they snuck it in on this last town meeting, which was great, but you know, generally people can't wait a year to buy real estate. So I think we should emphasize the fact that we have that flexibility that the CPC does not when unexpected, unanticipated opportunities come up.
I just want to jump in for administrative purposes here. A couple of members have expressed to me that because this is a back-to-back meeting, we want to keep it very focused and very much time limited. Just let everybody know that we had discussed 7:30, which is another 35 minutes. If we can hold to that, I think everybody would be more helpful. It's hard to have back-to-back meetings. So I've read your outline here. I think it's a good summary. You know, I think that some of the points that Bill's making should be included as well.
That's what I was gonna ask. Do we include that at this phase? Or is that step 2?
I think it's step 2. I think it's the arguments of why the trust is an effective vehicle for creating affordable housing and supporting affordable housing.
Yeah, so step 1 is just like I'm hoping gets at that clarity point that you brought up, Fred. In light of the conversation that just happened in the joint meeting, it sounds like it would be valuable for us to leave room to discuss adjustments to the down payment program. So I wanted to propose just taking out that amount in this phase.
I don't see that it weakens your argument at all by taking that phase out. I think that there is a danger for us to locking ourselves in for things that are a year or year and a half that we haven't completely worked out yet. So yeah, yes, absolutely.
So this is the other half to make sure you can see.
Make sure you fix the spelling on accessory.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. All throughout the discussion on the real estate transfer tax, even people who historically haven't supported the CPA kept saying, "Why can't the trust just get the money from the CPA?" And I heard a lot of very positive comments. People had a very positive opinion of the work that the Affordable Housing Trust has done to date, and I think that they're very receptive to this idea. We do, we're going to just need to be really vigilant about this, and I think that this is a great summary. As Chris told me the other day, he said, the step 1 is just an indication of a general idea what the money is. And he said, we don't even need to know what the money is. And maybe in future years, they'll take that line off the application because it just scares people.
Are they going to discuss them at a preliminary meeting?
No, they're not allowed. I don't know if you've ever been to one, but they're not allowed to. Basically, staff, which means Chris, reviews them and tells them whether it's an eligible thing or not, and then they move everything to this.
Okay.
Step 2.
Do they get to see it?
They get to see the step 1, yes.
Okay. Well, I think we should make the best argument we can here, and then just make the argument again when we go back. Yeah. So I feel like we have a ton of agreement. Do we want to just change the number to 550,000?
Well, before we do that, I'd kind of like to run through the budget that we're working on right now. I know everybody doesn't want to see that, but
what I guess I don't understand what purpose it serves.
it serves to show how little 550,000 goes for.
But I mean, but I'm just saying, like, I kind of know I'm
Fine.
I'm happy.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. Fine. Whatever.
Okay. The percent zero, can you switch that around? This is 0% down payment loan provides 0% loans. No, you had to write the other way.
No,
yeah.
Down payment is fine. You don't need a zero.
Yeah, that's fine. That's where's the percent. That's just switched. Yeah. I kind of like. So one thing I was thinking is that at the urging of town voters. So if they're not having a discussion, I guess I'm less worried about it. I was imagining them all sitting around discussing it, and the question would be like, which town voters who you're talking about.
So, I mean, in my experience as a grant reviewer and an applicant, this kind of step, or sometimes you're asked to submit an abstract where there's going to be minimal discussion, but it still is really it pays off if you really build your framing in that first step. So even though there isn't discussion, that's what I wanted to get at, is like, let's build our framing with as much clarity as we can, so that then when we go into stage 2, we can hang everything off of that. Fred, the question for me about amount is, if what we want to do is request 75% of the total pot, do we estimate the total pot, or do we or can we get an actual number for the total pot?
I'm not the best person to ask, because I think that we shouldn't be asking for that much money. But I think that if you look historically, they've, given about a third to each of the constituents, the open space, historic, and affordable housing.
So
It's not just the other
8,000, were you
it's not just the other affordable housing groups that were our competition for this money, but rather all of the other requesters.
Right. So on the 550,000, were you not thinking that we would make that request? You were thinking we'd reduce that?
I don't think that there's either. I don't know that either one of those was there. It was a placeholder.
I think it's a good placeholder. I think we should leave it in.
It was roughly twice what we got last year.
Because that sounds like that's in the ballpark of the 75%. And again, like I said, I agree with the assessment that this is not the year we're going to get 70.
No. To answer your question more directly, and the reason I've been going back to the budget is I would build this differently. I would build this as to what line items and what those costs are and what that total is. I would do it through doing a budget for what we could. That budget was about $550,000. And if you allow me, I will show it to you.
Okay, then.
Well, I'm sorry. I just want to do it.
You do it.
I have sent this to you folks previously.
So in the way you lay this out, can you tell me what is the difference between your FY 2024 funds and your FY 2024 budgeted? Is it really just an income column and an expense column?
First, can you see this?
Yes.
Could be bigger.
Can't be bigger. I don't know what your question. This is money that was carried. I'm sorry. This was money that was carried forward from the prior year. This is our fiscal year 24. It has nothing to do with our 25 budget.
Yes, you have two columns that are labeled FY. One is funds and one is budgeted. And my question is the funds
there's sources of money.
So one's basically,
so one is income and one is outgo. So basically the column that's labeled balanced forward and fiscal year 2024 funds, those are monies that are coming into us. And if you the money that's labeled as an expense is money that's going out in fiscal year 2024. That is a budgeted number. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then for your line item for the down payment assistance, in the balance column, you have that appearing as a negative. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's not funded.
So you have it projected as an expense, but you don't have a fund for it.
That is correct. Obviously, one has to either move something off of the budget or another line item, or not give any down payment assistance grants. The items that are in the expenses are the ones that we have discussed as expenses that we are going forward this year with. So they sum up to $580,000, but we only have $535,000 available to us. So the little box on the top there, that's the amount of money that we have, and the sources for that money. We carried $95,813 forward from last year. We had a total of $440,000 in receipts for 2024, giving us an available amount of $535,813. The expenses that we've talked about exceed that, so obviously we'd have to cut something. And probably the down payment assistance is where that's going to go. The reason that I wanted to show this, that I've been insisting on showing this, is to show how 550,000 or 580,000 might be distributed if the committee agrees, and how limited it is in terms of what projects can and can't be funded. To answer your other question about whether we could source money for the down payment assistance, we haven't committed any of these monies yet, and we could change any or all of these, including the RFPs that we will be discussing in November.
So
Does that help you? Yes.
yeah. So the income, this includes, I guess my question is, are we at the point where we're receiving income from some of the other, I know that's nominal, but some of the other sources that are now allocated to the trust?
There's only one, and that is the short-term rental fee. And it's not automatic. It has to fall to free cash and then be declared free cash, and the subsequent year be put in the budget to be allocated to us. I don't believe it's an automatic funding.
So we'll start seeing that in FY25.
I believe so. I've been told that it's around $10,000.
Right. And then under the development acquisition grant, that 175 is the line item that went into the town budget for the trust.
Yes. So on the upper box here, those are the sources of the funds, and under FY24, the general funds are reflected as 175,000, and we carried over 3,458 from a previous general fund allocation. We were given $15,000 seed money to start the trust, and the 3,500 is left from that money. The CPA, we carried 92,355 forward, and we're given 265. So
one thing that we could do is under the ADU pilot, just thinking through the timeline, the funds won't need to be all of the funds won't need to be available for spending before June 30th, 2024. Right. So that's that's a line that could get split between this fiscal year and next fiscal year.
Sure. I think that which
would mean we
need to look at, I'm sorry.
It would mean we could sit on because I think that if we have the down payment assistance program, even though right now we're pretty sure nobody is going to access it because we think it probably needs some tweaks for the current market, it probably would be good for us to be sitting on enough to at least fund one.
Yep. The other thing that I'll say to you is the RFP are requested amounts and they don't reflect actual grant amounts as yet.
Can you say that again a different way?
Okay. The development acquisition are reflective of certain RFP proposals that are only proposals at this point. They are perhaps requested amounts and don't reflect actual awards as of this point.
Okay.
In other words, we could give somebody less money.
So maybe it would make sense to do a revision for the November meeting, because we are going to need to make decisions in the November meeting based on the total amount of money we have to spend before June and what we need to spend it on. If we were looking at the development and acquisition line as a single pot rather than as the proposed asks, that
Right.
might help facilitate the discussion.
Okay. And perhaps change the ADU to shift 50,000 forward.
Yeah, at least, but I think, and I'm curious, Joe and Bill, what you think, but if you look at in the proposal, how the disbursement is at, like the disbursement occurs, and the timeline on applications, it's like a 3-month application window or application process. So that takes us a chunk. And then the first disbursement, and I'd have to check, but Joe, you might remember, I think the first disbursement is 50%, and then it disperses more slowly over time. So
I
think you could move like 50% of that line. Leave the admin, but you could move 50% of that line out of this fiscal year.
well, I think it's a little cleaner to have a source for one program. You know, maybe, I don't know. If we have a grant that's
Yeah.
155,000, it's better to have it encumbered all in one year, whether it's dispersed then going forward.
Except that in this particular case, what we have on the table is a pilot project with a start and an end date, and we are seeking funding. Like we're putting it, that's part of what we'll seek funding through CPA.
Yeah.
And so it means they could fund part of that for next fiscal year, and we would spend it then anyway. So that's part of what I see as an advantage potentially to splitting it to show kind of the actual on the fund. I mean, I guess the risk is, of course, if there's no money. So there is that. Like if we get no money next year, that would be a risk.
Well, anyway, yes, I think we can tweak this. So
I mean, it just means that if we, if whatever we split out of that for this fiscal year, we have to come up with for next fiscal year, once we award the grants.
Garfield has joined the attendees.
yes, I just promoted him. Do we have any other items that we'd like to talk about tonight?
Well, do we need to vote on language, final number, what we're going to present on?
I don't believe it needs a vote. Do you think it needs a vote?
I think it would, I think that it would be looked favorably upon.
Well, I don't know how it works. Yeah, I would be interested just to know like how when a statement comes from a board, what are you supposed to do?
Historically, I think we've had a vote on our
Sure,
application.
let's vote. Is there a proposal?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, Ananda made the motion. So the vote on the table is, we should tell Garfield what we're doing. And maybe we need to go back and share its screen again.
I mean, we can go over it one more time.
Um,
Is the motion to adopt that language and put in 550,000?
Sure.
That's what I thought it would be, yes.
And I think you needed 3 zeros up there.
Yes. We only want $550. That should do it.
Or 550 million.
Yeah. I'm not sure you need the pennies, but yeah, that's great. So Garfield,
I spend a lot of time in accounting spreadsheets, Fred.
Can you
All
see
right.
Garfield?
Okay, so I'll stop scrolling so you can read. And somebody tell me when you're ready to have me scroll down.
Garfield, what we're talking about is the step one application for the CPA. Ananda has revised the draft language for CPA, and the consensus of the board is that if we ask for $550,000, that would be about the maximum, roughly, that the CPA would be allowed to give. We're asking for the maximum affordable housing money, in other words. So what she's done is lay out 5 legs to the stool, or 5 bullet points that talk about how many items that we're talking about and how many things that we can be building on in order to promote affordable housing. The proposal is to accept this language and request $550,000. The proposal's been a proposal's been made and seconded. So if there's any discussion, do you understand, Garfield? Do you want to look at it some more or anything?
You're muted, Garfield.
Yes, I didn't get a chance to see the first part of it. It went kind of fast. I was reading it, and
All
then
right.
boom, it was. The emergency rental assistance. That's what we're speaking of doing. So I've obviously missed a couple. Isn't that what Construct does?
Yes,
We fund it.
Okay.
we fund it, and Construct is the administrator.
Okay. I'm good. Thank you.
I just like, I think I kind of like the last paragraph at the beginning.
The trust is taking the unusual step to request.
Yeah, just like that's like the headline. Like that's like what goes in the Berkshire Edge, you know.
Well,
No, I think, well,
That is sort of the headline.
Yeah, it's just like it. I think the big thing is like you come there, it sounds like chutzpah, right? It's like 550,000, but it's like, but we're not doing it because we're jerks. We're doing it because it's an emergency. So we acknowledge that it's an unusual step.
It is not unusual in a draft to write your first paragraph at the end and then have to move it. So
Yeah.
I've done it myself.
So
Yeah,
it doesn't surprise me that you're like, take that. I'm like, oh, I've told many people to do that before.
I have done that myself.
yeah.
So why doesn't we use the motion as to adopt, this is the proposal and allow Fred and I to do final revised edits.
I'm good
But
at
it
that.
won't change the
Yeah.
content.
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Oh, wait,
wait, hold on.
I do have one last thing. Do we want to restrict ourselves to only being able to purchase below market
Oh,
property? We
Uh,
may pay fair market value for something that can leverage a lot more money, which is what we did at North Plain Road.
yeah, that's fine.
well, you could argue,
I just don't think we should try and restrict ourselves, because who's to say what's below market?
Yep.
You know,
So why don't we say property acquisition and then later
Beautiful.
specify it's at or below market value?
that's fine.
But the big thing is we're authorizing Ananda and Fred to do the final language, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We will see before it's put out. Will we
Sorry.
see that before it goes to wherever it's going?
No, we're going to trust them.
No, we would have to convene a full
Yeah,
meeting.
we're not gonna have another meeting.
I think this is pretty close. I mean, I think that most it's just going to be wordsmithing.
Spirit, just keep to the spirit.
I think it's fine.
We'll move that paragraph for you, Joe.
Oh yeah, I want to see that paragraph at the top. So can we motion to vote that Ananda and Fred will submit the final language?
Yes.
So I take Bill's as a second, so that's sort of a modification of the main motion.
Okay.
So we're just gonna, well, do we have to vote on the modification? I don't want to do that.
Can we just?
I vote aye for the modification.
Yeah, I do too.
Me too.
Yeah, so the main motion is Ananda and Fred will modify as required the step 1 CPA application to maintain the spirit as shared in the draft document. And this is a roll call vote, so we'll start with Bill Cook,
Aye.
Joseph Method,
Aye.
Garfield Reed,
Aye, but I sure like to see stuff. But aye.
Ananda Timpain,
Aye.
and Fred Clark votes aye. Unanimous. Okay. That was the main subject tonight. Is there any other business that we can close the screen here? Is there any other business that anyone would like to talk about that's germane? Any trustee comments?
We're moving ahead, and I like it.
All right. In terms of community speak, I see Jeremy has his hand up, so I'm going to Jeremy, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, just for step ones, the way step ones are supposed to happen for CPC is we're just supposed to evaluate the applications if they meet the threshold for CPA, right? So if they're eligible. But the reality of what happens is there's an awful lot of questions that the committee members ask. We like to almost treat them as like mini step twos. So you will get asked a lot of questions, and you may get sent home with a bunch of questions to be answered in step 2.
Yep.
Fine.
Or questions or concerns or whatever.
But it can't be rejected.
It could be on eligibility.
So it's supposed to be based on eligibility, but CPC members vote in a way where they may vote no, even though something is technically eligible. So I'm not sure that all members stick to that. But generally things move through.
Well, I've seen Chris counsel people about that. So,
Yeah, I know, we get that, and then when it comes to a vote, people still vote no, even though when it's clearly eligible, and so you might get some of that. I think generally they'll move through. It would be very difficult for these not, or for this not to move to step 2.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other members of the public who would like to speak? Any media speak? I see Eileen Mooney has asked to make a comment. Go ahead, please.
It's a question, excuse me, because I was back and forth during the meeting. But have you discussed the ADU incentive program report?
No, we passed over it.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other comments, no additional media speak. So without objection, I'm going to close the meeting. Our next meeting is November 21st, I think. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thanks.